Hey Asish, you're in math and heat transfer, right? How's that going?
Man, it's been a rough semester. I just got my quiz score back. I didn't do so hot.
Ew.
Oh geez, that's rough. Well, I guess you probably should grind for the next one, right?
Yeah, here's my idea. My next quiz is on conduction, convection, and radiation, the three methods of heat transfer. I realized that I'm more of a visual learner, and I think I'm gonna apply these three real-life heat transfers to cooking steak.
How are you gonna do that?
So, for conduction, I'm gonna use a pan. For convection, I'm gonna use an air fryer. And for radiation, I'm gonna use a toaster oven.
Oh, well, I guess if you think that'll work.
Good luck.
After they left, Asesh went to the kitchen and gathered all the materials he needed to conduct his experiment. He cut the steak into 5 by 5 by 2 centimeter pieces and covered them with 5 milliliters of olive oil and heated the appliances to 275 degrees Fahrenheit for consistency.
For each method, he checked the temperature every 60 seconds until they reached 180 degrees Fahrenheit and cooled to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The first piece he cooked in a pan where the heat from the stove transferred to the steak through the pan by conduction. The second he put in the air fryer where the fan circulated hot air and heated up the steak through convection. He propped up the last piece with popsicle sticks to minimize conduction and put it in the toaster oven. The heat lamp at the top radiated heat and cooked the steak by increasing the energy of the molecules.
Sage studied for his quiz by seeing how each method of heat transfer affected the cooking time of the steak.
Transfer that I had to study for my quiz is conduction, and conduction is simply the energy transfer due to collisions between atoms, molecules, and free electrons as they undergo random movement. Conduction can be modeled by Fourier's law. The first part of Fourier's law is heat flux, which is the Q over A part. K is the material's thermal conductivity, which can be found in experimental data. Delta T is the change in temperature, and delta X is the change in distance. The second method of heat transfer that I would like to talk about is convection. And convection is the energy transfer due to the bulk motion of a fluid. In this case, fluid is not only a liquid, but also anything that moves with response to a force. So here, air can also be considered a fluid. Convection is modeled by Newton's law of cooling, which states that the heat flux is equal to H times delta T. Here, H is the heat transfer coefficient and can be found experimentally. Last method of heat transfer that I would like to talk about is radiation. Radiation is different than the other two heat transfer methods because it is due to electromagnetic waves. And these electromagnetic waves can have three incidents upon an object. You can see that it can reflect, which is called reflection. It can be absorbed, which is called absorption, or it can be transmitted, which is called transmission. Radiation is modeled by Stefan's Boltzmann law, which states that the heat flux is equal to sigma times t to the fourth, where sigma is a constant. However, one important thing to note is that this formula is only for black bodies, which can be assumed as ideal absorbers. However, black bodies don't exist in the real world, so to account for this, we have a new formula which states that the flux is equal to the emissivity times sigma times t to the 4, where emissivity is essentially just a correction factor.
So these are the three methods we have cooked our steak, and the experimental data are quite within our expectation, except for the toaster oven case, which turns out to be the most time-consuming method to cook. So where's the source of error? Firstly, every time we try to probe our thermometer into the steak, there is gas leakage. And secondly, the heating bulb inside our toast oven isn't always on, which would make the process longer than our expectation. So it should also be mentioned that the composition of our steak also affects the heating time. For example, the proportion of fat and the proportion of water. And lastly, the air inside our air fryer is actually flowing, which would accelerate the heating process. An engineer calls this forced convection. And these are our discussion of source of error.
When modeling the three methods of heat transfer by cooking steak, I often had to make a lot of assumptions, such as assuming that the other two methods of heat transfer were negligible when cooking using each heat transfer method.
In the real world, chemical engineers often have to make a lot of these assumptions, so it is essential to know when and how to use these assumptions.
Our project demonstrated how the different methods of heat transfer affects the cooking time of steak. For chemical engineers in the food industry, knowing how long it takes for food to heat or cool based on the method used is important to ensure that the food tastes good, preserves well, and doesn't develop or keep harmful bacteria.
Harry. Thank you.
Sage, great job. Way to improve.